an invocation and thought and the Pledge of Allegiance. So, council member. Oh,
Someone's prayer is going to be recorded.
all right.
Well, I believe in prayer, so let's have a prayer. Heavenly Father, we come before Thee and express the gratitude that we feel as we consider the great blessings that we have, that we were able to sit down with our families and others over Thanksgiving and to ponder about so much that's been given to us. And we're mindful this night of so many of the citizens who might struggle physically or mentally or emotionally, those who are dealing with mourning, such as the Crispin family. May Eric and her children feel the strength of the Spirit to be able to help them through this challenge. We pray this night that decisions rendered would be appropriate and best for the citizens. And we give thanks for them and appreciate their support. And we pray for this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
After me.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, council member Severing. We appreciate that. Now enter into our consent agenda. I would just like to make note that this is a special city council meeting. Documents have been signed. I think Susan put them out on the webpage. So I think we're all legal. Before we begin our active agenda this evening, I would call council for any conflicts of interest. John, is council member Swanson online yet?
No, I'm sending him a new link, so.
Okay. Any conflicts of interest regarding the agenda tonight, council members? All right, I see none. So we'll enter into our active agenda. We'll start by welcoming public comments from those who are here in attendance this evening and those who are online. John, I'm assuming we have some citizens online this evening.
We do, and Councilman Swanson is now here.
All right, so if you'd like to make a comment, I don't know, the podium here, just step up there and state your name if you're a resident of North Ogden. And please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Also, John, if you would watch, if you have a comment online, if you would just press the raise your hand button and John will let you speak. So any public comments from those in attendance here tonight? Seeing none. John, any online?
No.
Seeing none, then we'll go to item number 4 on our agenda. This will be presented by Susan Nance, our city recorder, and it's regarding accepting an annexation petition for land located at approximately 1500 North and 150 East. Susan?
Mayor and Council, Dan Birch has submitted an application for Howard D. Cheney to petition for an annexation of 11.114 acres located at approximately 1500 North 150 East in Weber County in Utah here. As required by Utah State Code, the Weber County Surveyor has reviewed and given conditional approval of the annexation plat map that was done through Ensign Engineering. The property being proposed for annexation is within our city annexation declaration and on our map. The petitioner is requesting the R4 PUD zone, but this will be something that will be reviewed at a later time from the Planning Commission, and they will make a recommendation back. The petitioner meets all the requirements to start the annexation process, and it's recommended that the City Council accept the petition to start the annexation process. Keep in mind, this is an administrative item. It is not legislative.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Susan? If not, I would look for a motion to accept the annexation petition for land located at approximately 1500 North and 150 East. Do we have a motion?
Mayor, I move that we accept the petition for annexation of the property located approximately 1500 North and 150 East.
Thank you, Council.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Councilmember Severing. Is there any further discussion or questions? Not, we'll have a roll call vote. Let's start with Councilmember Swanson,
Yes.
Councilmember Barker.
Yes.
Councilmember Stoker,
Yes.
Councilmember Ekstrom,
Yes.
and Councilmember Severing.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Item number 5 on our agenda is a discussion on a potential rezone for Quail Ponds subdivision. I understand Carson would like to take a few minutes and update us on some of his thoughts. So Carson?
Thank you. I'm Carson Jones. I live 1106 West, 4050 North in Pleasant View. The reason why I wanted to come in here and talk to the council this evening was not Quail Pond itself. I'd like to enlarge Quail Pond. We have a pointer here somewhere.
Still this one.
So this piece of ground right here, this little 5.7 acre parcel, we have under contract, and we're looking to purchase that. And we would like to expand the Quail Ponds. Right now, Quail Pond just, I'm shaky, but Quail Pond just knuckles around and has a little horseshoe shaped road to finish it off. We would like to come in here, plug the road straight from Quail Ponds and go up to serve this 5.7 acres. But the reason to come in here is because in order to do this, that has such an awkward shape piece of ground. It's just that little, just the south side of that open field. We need the Quail Pond zone on this piece when we annex it in. And I just wanted to get the feel for the council on what your take on that would be.
Okay, John, what's the current zoning on the property?
So it's currently in the county, and I believe it's in the A1 zone for the county. Do have.
Which is, requires what, a 40,000 square foot lot
Yes.
in that zone in the county?
Let me see if I can get the future land use map for the council.
And Carson, refresh our memory on what the Quail Ponds current zone is?
It's called Quail Ponds, and it's just 4,200 square.
What's
Quail
the-
Pond zone.
What's the zone?
It's actually Quail Pond zone. That's what it is noted as. Planned
It's-
residential.
It's similar to the R15 zone, but it's a PRUD zone that's specifically for that neighborhood.
So your request that you're asking the council to consider is to go from RE20 to R1.5, John, 1.5?
1.5, yes.
Okay. Have any questions for Carson? Concerns or
So is, Mayor,
Councilmember Stoker?
so Carson, is there more than one, how did they get out of that? Is there another access out or just the one through your?
There's in the Ward Farms project, accesses it also. That stubs over to it up towards Fruitland Drive. So it would come up from Quail Ponds and then in from Ward Farms, and then if and when the other parcel ever were to be obtained by somebody, that would connect into Fernwood and onto 2100.
Do we know what the proposed general plan? Is that the proposed plan there, John?
So this is the proposed future land use map that the council will see on December 14th. So don't tell Scott I ruined the surprise. And so this is Quail Ponds right now, and then this is the property that's being talked about. That is, this striped area was an area to potentially look at conservation easements or open space. Generally, the number 9 is basically an acknowledgement that it's for the most part, fully developed. And we won't likely see a dramatic change in that from what's currently there, which is why Quail Ponds is included in that loop, because it's entitled and developed. There's not Mystery Meadows, it's, what's the, Fernwood. Yeah, so Fernwood's out here on 2100 North. And Ward Farms is right here. So,
Okay, so to summarize that, we basically, it's in the county and the zone Ag 1, which is a 40,000 square foot lot. The future or the proposed land use map is looking at that as open space, not identified as high density. And Carson's asking to take it to R15.
Yes.
Have any questions, council?
So is your plan is to build on lots that are similar size and dimension that you've already put
Exactly,
there?
yes.
So it's just a continuation.
It's
So
just a
that's
continuation of,
generally when we
Well,
want to annex something in and we want to look at the zone, that's what we're looking at, right? We want it to, I think there's all of these little lists of
Oh,
things.
yeah.
It's like, it's gonna look like the rest of the.
Yeah.
playground. So, and so am I understanding you correctly that you do want to access through to Fruitland Drive?
eventually, yes, we do.
Eventually.
Yeah, we
Okay.
don't need to, but
It isn't.
that's irrelevant. I guess that, not irrelevant, that's not a concern or not of ours. That would be up to the city if we want that access on Fruitland
And
Drive.
you currently own the land, right? You've already purchased it or?
Have not purchased it yet. That's why I'm here.
That's, okay. Deciding whether or not you want it.
Yeah.
Okay, that sounds good. Let's see. Through.
So this is the polling ground we're talking about, checkpoint.
Chad's ground, yep.
And then Atkinson, you have access to Atkinson's as well, or just?
I do not have access to Atkinson, but maybe soon, hopefully, maybe not. We'll see.
Do you have kind of an idea of the plat that you want to put on it yet?
Yeah, this is kind of an L shape laying down. It's got a wider piece on the west, so there'll just be, the road from Quail Pond will come in and there'll be lots on either side of the street on that wider shape. Right there. This road will come in here and there'll be lots here and here. Then the road will just go up. We'll have to build this road and single load it. So the road we'll have lots on the south side of the property here, south side of the road, up until it comes into this stub street that will continue through eventually.
Okay, and so you own or you're looking at purchasing this land to the south,
Yeah.
but you don't, but not the plot to the north. Is that what
Well,
you
we
were
would
saying?
love to
Blake?
buy that too, but
That's the
It's not
Atkinson
for
one you were
sale.
saying, Blake, is that, who owns that one? The one up to the north, that's the Atkinson property? Okay.
So, any other questions, Councilmember Ekstrom?
No, I think that covers it.
I would just remind the council that actually what the genesis of the general plan advisory committee was to actually create a land map that could be vested. So my concern is, so we're coming right out of the chute here and just ignoring what the general plan advisory committee is going to present to us. As that was one of the reasons we asked them to do the map, so we wouldn't be rezoning all the property in the city, particularly, the remaining RE20 property. If I understood John right, this was identified as potential open space or conservation. John, did I understand that correctly?
yes, that's correct, Mayor. And,
Okay.
or basically that there'd be a conservation strategy employed in these striped areas shown on the
Right.
map.
can I ask you a question about conservation
Sure.
areas? I mean, so I'm a developer, so I have a little different mindset here, but what does that even mean, a conservation area? That means that this ground is gonna be as it currently sits forever and ever and not
Potentially.
gain its value?
Potentially. When you say gain its value,
If somebody were to sell it and develop it, and so is the city or the state or whoever gonna maintain this?
Well, that was just one of the options there. It could be the city, it could be foundation, but it's identified as either open space or conservation there. So doesn't mean it will be in conservation.
Okay,
But I think the landowner knows what the zoning is in that property.
oh, yeah,
When they
absolutely,
buy it, when they bought it and they own it, they know what
absolutely,
the
100%.
zone is. Well, let me go to Councilmember Barker. Do you have any questions or comments for Carson?
I was gonna agree with you that the general plan is bringing this back. Well, I guess we heard December 14th, so that's at our next meeting. This map, and they're gonna present their findings. We've already denied, or not denied, table 3 zoning requests, I think, in the last year. So I'm of the opinion that we wait until we hear from the general plan advisory committee, or, yeah, that's the right word, general plan advisory committee. But since it's only one more meeting, I'm not in a hurry to get something done tonight. And then my other
I think,
opinion is
yeah.
I'd like to listen to the planning commission.
Yeah.
That they should look at it first.
I think Carson's question is, would the council be willing to entertain potential rezone on that property?
Exactly, yeah,
So he could probably determine whether he wants to proceed in buying
Yeah.
the property or not. So
correct.
I think maybe just the question would be, is there interest in entertaining a rezone on that property at this point in time?
And I'm gonna say, I'm gonna wait until after I don't want to answer yes and then have the advisory committee,
Sure.
which I'm a part of, come in and say, this is what
Yeah.
we're proposing, and then it kind of contradicts it. So I'm not gonna give an opinion tonight.
Okay, Councilmember Stoker?
I'm in agreement until we know more what we've asked our steering committee there, or not the whatever.
Advisory.
Advisory committee to do is, no, I'm not, till we know, would not entertain this either without knowing all those facts.
Okay. Councilmember Swanson, are you with us?
I am. I've got 2 thoughts. Excuse me. One is, I understand the concern that Mr. Jones has in retaining property value. Is this, if we block something out as conservation and we do not allow a property owner to pursue annexation or rezoning, is that some kind of a constitutional taking where we force them to do what we want to do? John?
So we would likely, if this property, if it was going to be forced into the city would be required to annex it based on our annexation policy, but we wouldn't be required to give it the zoning density that is being requested. Probably the city would be well within their rights to say it would have to be an RE20 zone, unless the city created a new zone that was a higher density. So
Right.
we
I
wouldn't be able to take away all the development rights.
I understand that, but when we talk about that, we're not even going to consider a rezone because the steering committee, and I'll remind council that the steering committee has been 2 years on their job, and we still don't have a formal presentation. I know that we're close, but it's been 2 years that we've been putting off. And one of the concerns that I expressed at the very creation of this steering committee, not steering committee, sorry, advisory committee now, was that it was going to be a de facto halt on building in the city, and that it would stretch on and on and on and on. And this is exactly what's happened. And I have a concern about that when it comes to landowner rights. I also have a concern that we as the city are going to step in and tell a landowner that your land is going to be conserved, whether you like it or not. And it's going to be up to the city to either purchase that land or the landowner to find a foundation that would be willing to buy the land and conserve it. I don't know of either that are willing to come into North Ogden at the moment. and give somebody who may be looking to retire, excuse me, off the value of their land. I understand that R15 might not be the appropriate. It also might be because of what's right next to it in Quail Ponds. We've already done R15 in that area on land that used to be RE20 at one point. So I have concerns that we're putting the cart before the horse when it comes to the conservation piece. I don't have a problem with considering the annexation and a rezone. That doesn't mean that we're going to get it. I think we have a duty as council, as elected officials, to give a hearing to those who want to do something with their land, and not to just brush it off and say, well, no, we're not even going to consider that. I think we have a duty to consider it. That's my 2 cents. I'd be willing to hear it. I do want to hear what we get from the advisory committee. But again, it's been 2 years and we've been putting off developers and land rezones and things for 2 years now, waiting for that committee to do something. And we're just now getting it. So that's where I'm sitting at the moment.
Councilmember Swanson, I would remind you that we have rezoned numerous properties during the process. So we have not stopped rezoning of properties.
No, we haven't, Mayor, and you're absolutely right. But we have on properties like this where maybe there's a feeling that we don't like what's being proposed. We have used the advisory committee and its future presentation to us to put off some.
Yeah.
And I think either we look at and consider all, or we don't consider all. We can't keep playing this game.
Yeah, once again, I think, we do have an obligation to entertain annexation into the city, which we would surely do. I think the question is, is R15 the proper zone there? And, I don't think we're trying to not rezone, but if we're going to have a future land map and the land use map, when we started out with this saying we wanted to divest these zones, and the committee in their potential has come back and said either conservation, which you're right is very difficult to accomplish, or open space. I think at some point in time the council has to consider, are we going to retain any RE20 in the city? Because I think, as John said, the council has no obligation to rezone anybody's property. And so I think that's the question there. So we can surely say that we will entertain an annexation, because I think we are obligated to do that.
I believe that this little parcel here and the one of Atkinson's north of it are part of an island. A couple of years ago, the city did selected a few island parcels and already selected them for ease of annexation. So I believe that this piece of property is already on the slate to be annexed if and when somebody decides to do it.
Oh yeah, I don't think we're against annexing it in.
Yeah.
The question is, what zone would it be annexed in at?
Yes, exactly.
My concern with the city coming in and saying we're going to conserve this as RE20 is, why didn't we do that with the land immediately north, immediately south, and immediately west?
I can't answer that, but somebody once said 2 wrongs don't make a right.
I understood that, but there is some obligation when a piece of land is surrounded by lower density. There is some obligation of the city to consider equal density for an adjoining piece of land. It's not like the request on this would be for an R15 in the middle of nothing but RE20 or county land. I mean, it's essentially R15 immediately west. It's lower, it's higher density, but it's lower than RE20 immediately north and immediately south. I don't understand. And again, we could drag this on all night and I'm out on the road, but I think we have to be careful that we're picking and choosing. We're hand picking winners and losers here with somebody else's land. This isn't the city's land.
I guess I would ask why we had the advisory committee go through and do a future land use, asking them to present it, that we would vest those zones.
Well, I think there's a miscommunication there. Nobody ever said, at least not that I'm aware of, that the advisory committee would come up with something and we would simply rubber stamp it.
No.
The final
The
say.
council will approve that, but
Mayor,
now let me
excuse me.
just ask the question from Councilmember Swanson's comment there. Do we have an obligation to rezone that to the surrounding zones?
No, the state has allowed what's called spot zoning as a perfectly legal thing now.
John, in the past, when we have dealt with rezones and individuals have come in asking for, I'm thinking of the Johnny Hanson piece that was up there on Lowman View Drive. One of the reasons that was even considered up there at the lower density than some of the neighbors wanted was A, because it was a transition, and B, because there was similar zone around it. I'm just trying to understand why, anyway,
As you'll recall, we didn't grant the zone that was requested.
No, but we did
on that
grant,
property, but we did consider, and I think we would consider Mr. Carson's request, that we will consider your request for the zone. We will consider your request for annexation, but we cannot guarantee that we would zone it R15.
I don't think anybody's wanting to guarantee R15. I'm simply stating that I think we have some obligation to consider something more dense than RE20, given what's all the way around it. And yes, legally we can do spot zoning. We've been talking about getting away from spot zoning, and this, except anyway, I could go on and on. I just think we have to be careful about what we're doing with land rights and with somebody else's land, telling them, that they can or cannot use it fruitfully.
I think that's what zoning is all about. If there's no zoning, we look at that as an impairment on land rights, then I don't know why we have zones. Councilmember Severing.
Carson, first off, thanks for being here. I've worked with developers and this can be a lengthy challenge. I do want to say that part of the last 2 years to defend the General Advisory Committee, part of that was COVID, and that did make it difficult for them to get together. Here's the one challenge we have, Carson, is we like to have citizen involvement in a lot of issues.
Sure.
So we turn them loose and say, okay, go do your work, and they come back and we just kind of undermine them. So here's what I'm gonna recommend, is just that we wait till they get back, until we get back.
That's fantastic. I have no problem with that either, but this whole, we're gonna keep this for conservation, I just can't quite wrap my head around that. It feels like a taking, but.
Yeah, once again, let me clarify, the city's not saying they're going to do that. That's an option under the current proposed. There's been no right that we're going to take anybody's land on the conservation. That's an option based upon the proposed map. So let's make sure we understand that. Councilman Barker.
I'm looking at a zoning map, and it actually says Quail Pond is an R18 on the city's website. Ward Farms is an R18 and Fernwood's an R110. So what they're saying with conservation, it's not that you're conserving it. It's if you want R15, we'll give you what's one of the options is to do what's around it, and then to go down, you donate or dedicate some land to the city for a park, something open.
Sure. Yeah,
So there are options. It's not that we're gonna take your whole land and conserve it as hayfield pasture. As much as I would like that.
I would too, in some weird alternate universe.
I agree with Councilman Swanson that we should be looking at it. I don't know if RE20 is the right zone, but.
We are not R18 in Quail Ponds either. That's a miscalculation, but.
Okay. All I can say is what I'm looking at.
Sure.
And it's the same one that's up there, so we can get looked at, maybe get updated,
Yeah,
but on the north and south, you have R18 and R110, so
sure.
to go down, might be, we have to help work something out, but.
That works. That's all we're asking for is that, if it's getting, if we're not, it's such an odd piece of property that it's not doable without a certain zone. So that was our whole reason for coming. So if we could get that, some consideration even after we hear from the steering committee, then that would be fantastic.
Yeah, we can give you assurance. We'll give it some civic consideration. So,
That works.
okay,
Thank you much.
thank you. Need to get the lights back on here. So council, I think that, we've got a new member of our council coming up and future council member Dalpaz is with us tonight. I've invited him to come and be with us. I think, COVID has impaired numerous things, but I think it's really time to start moving forward and get focused on the next period of time. So I would like to just go through some priorities to be considered by the city council. These are just suggestions or ideas to be considered, that we can maybe ultimately prioritize some of these things, or if we have things to add to it, we can surely do that. But ultimately, I would like us to agree upon some of the priorities that we can work on in the next period of time. And then after we go through this list, I think John has a list he can pull up there. This is by no way all inclusive, but I think it's something we can at least generate discussion on this evening. And I'll just run through these and maybe give a little thought process on why some of these things are on the list. You may question why we need to concentrate on the completion and occupancy of the public safety building. Obviously, building the public safety building is going to be a big project that we have to concentrate on to make sure that we get it built within the parameters that we financially somewhat agreed to based upon how much we're going to bond. But sometimes building the facility is only one part of the process. The other process is making sure it gets occupied and functions properly. So that's why that is on the list. We've already committed to bonding. We've already selected a contractor. I think John by last Friday had the agreement signed. I'm not sure. But if he didn't, I'm sure he'll get them soon. And so we've already committed to it, but I just think we need to be aware that those expenditures that we're talking about, which are the largest, I think maybe the city has done, that we keep an eye on that. I think too, as our city grows, that we need to have a plan and make sure that we're maintaining and growing our police force in accordance with our population. I think we have two challenges there that we have to come up with. One is retaining. We've got some very fine officers. Some have been around a little bit longer than others. We have some new officers that are being developed that have a lot of potential. And we, I think, need to have a plan to retain those officers. Additionally, we know our police force will grow as the population continues to grow in our city. And so I think it's important that we understand that and properly budget as we move forward and have a plan on how we will manage that growth. The next item is improvement of our trailheads with emphasis on the trail at 2750 north. Some of you have heard me say as I go out on my back deck, I can see that whole part of the city there. And frankly, I was a little bit embarrassed when we had the flag hanging up there and a lot of people coming in from outside of our city and a lot of people in our city and that trailhead and its 3 porta potties and somewhat remaining gravel and bumpy roads up there. I just don't think that's representative of our city. And one of the things that I think attracts people to our city is the trails and our parks and the beautiful mountains we have. If we're going to use that as part of our economic development plan, I think we probably need to put a little bit of additional emphasis on how that represents the city. The next item that I've listed is phasing and construction of Barker Park. I think we've put that off about long enough now because we keep looking at it and saying it's a $12 or $15 million project and where are we going to come up with that money? Now that council member Dalpaz, or future council member, hopefully he's got that kind of money that he can donate to the city. But that not being a high probability, we probably need to come up with a plan there and really phase that in. And you can see there, I've kind of indicated, I think where we could start is by getting adequate parking there. And then we have a lot of demand. Councilmember Severing just mentioned citizen input. I think one of the major feedback of those who campaigned and those who talked to us is why don't we have pickleball courts? Well, that's something that residents have been asking for a substantial period of time. So I would hope that we can come up with some type of phasing and get that park underway, which would include, some fundraising efforts. I know Council Member Severing has a 501c3 that he's trying to utilize there, but I would like to see us develop a plan in that regard. I think it's also time to determine what we're going to do here with our commercial corridor, particularly with the basin we have there. And that's prime commercial property. I think we need to have a plan and a plan that can be executed to try to get that developed along with our other commercial corridors. And I'm not proposing what it's developed with, but I think just leaving that ground vacant doesn't make a lot of sense when that's one of the primary corridors into our city. And so I'd like us to actually concentrate on that. And one of the plans I have to present to the council is that we have a council member that's specifically assigned to economic development, and that we work closely with the Economic Development Committee to concentrate on bringing adequate businesses into our city. I think we've got to be cognizant of the fact that we need to always look at our balance between property tax and sales tax to fund the city. We can either try to balance that out, or I think be transparent with the citizens and indicate that without growth in sales tax, there'll be growth in property taxes, which nobody's really happy about. I think it's time to, I know when I was campaigning for mayor a couple of years ago, the amphitheater was a big topic. And my response was, I think we're willing to invest the amount of money based upon the demand for the use of the facility. We've taken our first step and we've got a rental agreement in place, and we try to rent that. But I really think that for us to determine that, we need to get adequate lights and sound down there in the amphitheater so that we can ultimately determine what the demand for use is there. And I would say that that also would involve some citizen fundraising. One of the thoughts I had is that we could seek a ramp grant, and the city would match that raised by the citizens to fund the other half of the matching funds on the ramp grant. We can't delay much longer, although John tells me there's a new state rule that might be beneficial. But our RDA, I think, is it 2024, John?
23.
23, that's just around the corner. Here in about a month, we'll be in 2022. It's probably time to make a decision on what the future use of those funds are going to be. We've had some talks about, the plaza down there on, is it 1900? There, some people have talked about making sure we take care of the aquatic center. There was a plan presented with 4 or 5 ideas. Those might be relevant, they may not be. But I think we've got to develop that plan, and that surely would tie into our economic development efforts. Preservation and restoration of our natural waterways. Just like land, they're not making any more of those. And I think it's important that we do all we can to preserve and restore those. Now, it probably would take some ordinances, some setback ordinances. We can't undo what's already happened, but we can maybe limit additional problems that may occur there. Our water system. I think we've got to make sure that we're analyzing that we're looking at adequate storage. We've talked about a new tank off 2100, but we've also talked about, maybe tapping some of the wells that have been drilled. We're not starting off real good with snow thus far. So I think we need to look at our water system, which includes xeriscaping. We have an emergency order in place right now. How are we going to not only preserve water, but how are we going to maximize our water system? I think we need to determine, and we had a discussion about that tonight, on preservation of open space. What's our parks growth strategy, and what is the council's thought on trying to keep portions of the city in their current state, as long as we're being fair and equitable to the property owners. We've talked about the development of an arts guild, an enhancement of meeting activities. I would like to really see us concentrate on making that happen, and getting some new ideas and meaningful things in the city, but taking some of the pressure off of the city as a whole and getting more citizen involvement. I think we can do that as we really put an emphasis on developing the arts guild. And then I think we need to develop and implement a long-term financial plan, which I would like to at least present some ideas for consideration tonight, so we can think about how we can maintain our fiscal strength in the city, and meet the new obligations we're taking on. We've made a commitment to our citizens that we will do all we can not to raise property taxes to pay for the public safety building. I think we've evidenced our sincerity in that regard with what we've done in generating cash to put into the facility and budgeting to make sure we have adequate revenue in excess of expenses to make that payment. And then I think we need to also have a plan on what thoughtful growth is. We talk about that all the time, but what does that really mean? I think it's only fair to the landowners and the developers that they have a clear picture of how we can go about making sure that the growth in the city is thoughtful. So those are some of the things that spilled out of my mind. Surely open to add to this list. So what I'd like to do maybe is go around to each council member and also invite future council member Dalpaz to give us some input. But maybe we could start with council member Swanson. Do you have any thoughts or additional comments, Councilman Swanson?
I don't. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. We're buzzing down the road. I just wanted to make sure the road noise wasn't overwhelming. I really like the list, Mayor. You and I have talked about it a number of times, and I think these are all great priorities that the city needs. In particular, the Barker Park phasing in. I agree with you 100% that we need to do something to get that park started and to start phasing it in. It's been 20 years now since the land was purchased, or roughly 20 years. And we have very little that's been done with the middle and the north piece. And then on the RDA funds, I believe, John, if my memory serves me correct, we need to have those programmed by the end of 23. Is that correct? Not necessarily spent, but programmed.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. But certainly the pool and a number of things that you've mentioned, Mayor, that that RDA money can be used for. No, I like the list. I agree with it. Yeah, I wouldn't add anything to it. It's a pretty full plate.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Swanson. Councilmember Stoker, I know you're going to be leaving us here soon, but what would you like to add or comment on?
Of course, my first priority has always been the public safety building, and I agree with that the city is going to grow. We're going to need more officers to cover that growth. So I think your idea of having a plan on how we retain them and the budget for this growth in officers is important. Barker Park definitely needs something done. It has been a long time. And I think what you've outlined is good.
I know we can't accomplish it all, but as we prioritize this and maybe set some timeframes out over the next period of time, we'll at least accomplish as much as we can. JD.
I have been thinking a lot about it. I would like to see numbers so we know what we're looking at. So I feel like part of what we would need is we would have to do, even though you almost have to spend a little bit of money in planning to understand what the pickleball courts would look like, what the phasing would look like. And if we had every single one of these bulleted where we could say, okay, pickleball courts would be, 150,000 or whatever it's going to cost. And bathrooms up at the trailhead would be same amount. It would help me visualize a little bit better if we could at least have some initial cost estimates to each piece. So I would really like to see that as part of this discussion, because in my mind, sometimes if there's a more affordable project, and if you have this big list that you have to conquer, if there are some that are a little less expensive, it's almost easier to just get those out of the way sooner than later, and we continue to develop the plan towards the more expensive things down the road.
Now, those are some excellent points, and I think that as we prioritize this and develop plans, we do that based upon the prioritization. Many years ago, when I was in public accounting, after each job, we were rated on our performance on that particular job. And one of the seniors I had, I'll never forget, he said, sometimes it's best to start with the hard things. And you get those knocked out of the way and they don't burden you. So two philosophies there, but I agree 100%. We need to make sure we've estimate the cost of these. And then as I talk about the financial plan tonight, I think you'll see that it does tie in there together. Is there anything on your mind that you would like to add to this list or delete for a future discussion?
No, the only thing I'd like to add is that Scott was talking to me about the potential of the King's Plaza. I can't remember what it's called now. North Ogden Plaza, maybe? Yep. And
Pizza Man Plaza?
Yeah. And looking at the potential to use RDA funds for that area. And I'm really interested in that because it ties into economic development. I think it would be a very big task because we have a lot of businesses in the area and we have to figure out how to make it work for everyone. But I think that that's something that we could look at. And Scott asked because he's going to be putting in a request to the Wasatch Front Regional Council
Yes.
for a grant. And he asked if I would put in a letter of recommendation as the economic development chairman. And so I partly wanted to wait until this conversation tonight to make sure that everyone would feel comfortable that I put in my letter of encouragement for him to submit that to the Wasatch Front Regional Council and try to get a grant to study the area. So I wanted to just throw that out there.
And I think that has been submitted, or is near submission.
Near submission, yeah.
And that's on my copy. It does have plaza out there in parentheses. I think I removed that because I didn't want it to be limited to that, but I understand there's gonna be a new owner of that plaza.
Here, look at it.
Looking at it, that's one of the things you pointed out is sometimes the owner doesn't necessarily want to be involved in that because of the additional rents and their investment. But anything else that comes to your mind we should add to this list?
No, I think if we add to this list, I think we're gonna overwhelm ourselves. This is a very good start, but I would like to see it 1, 2, 3, where do the priorities lie?
Yeah.
But I feel like I can only do that once we have at least some initial cost estimates to each one.
Well, that'll be kind of almost circular because, how much money do we spend going through there? Maybe what we can do is prioritize these based upon our best knowledge and then go after a couple, but good points.
We could give them ratings like, when you do the restaurant, get her app like dollar signs. This one will be $4 signs. This one's only $2.
Yeah.
There you go. John, can you do that, please?
So, and some of the most expensive may be the most meaningful. So I think we do have to balance what's the most meaningful versus our ability to accomplish that. And, all these things may not make our final priority because we don't want to overwhelm ourselves. But I think once we get that priority on what's top, we can concentrate and figure way. I have a lot of confidence in our city employees and the council that they'll figure a way to make things happen if we can agree upon it. But if we can't agree upon it, then it's hard to accomplish. So, Councilmember Barker.
Your list looks good. I have nothing more there.
Anything you want to cross off?
No.
Okay. Councilmember Severing?
The only thing that I had on my list that you did not have on the list is, and I don't know, maybe John can give us some guidance and direction on this, but as I thought about this, how are we doing as a city? And I mean, not the citizens, but as a city, to be able to complement the citizens if there was ever a really serious emergency. I mean, do we have emergency supplies where we can complement things like that?
So that's part of what the mayor's second part of this presentation is making sure we have that emergency. It's not focused on supplies per se, but it's that line of thinking.
Okay.
And Councilmember Severing, in the new public safety building, part of our plan is to have that emergency operations center. And not only physically do we have to plan for that, but with some of the things you talked about. I know one of the things that where I was previously employed, we had what we called an emergency pallet, knowing the pandemic was coming. So we were able to have all those things in the stores with future planning. When there was a shortage on masks and things of that nature, we had those available. So I think that'd be part of the planning of the public safety building with the subcategory of the emergency operations center. So very good point. Councilmember Ekstrom, speak to us
Well, when I see a lot
briefly. Just kidding.
I try to be concise, I really do. But when I see a lot of here are projects, and what I see is kind of a gap is someone to manage all those projects. We've got John, who's our city, manager and city attorney. And it's like, I just don't feel like we should put project manager on top of it. He does that, but with all of these things that we want to get done, there's a certain amount of expertise that comes from having someone that's in construction even. And I think we could probably either hire someone I don't know if we need to hire them like as an employee or full-time or anything, but maybe we could get some consulting done that could help us actually roadmap these things, right? It's like, okay, well, we want to build Barker Park. This is the first thing we want to do. These are the things that we have possibly going that can actually put them together and say, okay, you want to do this project that's going to take, this amount of time, this amount of money, putting it right here, and putting it up in little, blocks and chunks. And so I think we just have a little gap there and some expertise that I think I would really like to look into getting a project manager, for lack of better.
Excellent point. Anything you'd like to remove from the list or add?
No, I like this list. This was, you had things on there that I hadn't thought of, and I was like, ooh, that's a good one, and that's a good one too. So yeah, no, I like it.
And your point is excellent. I had the conversation with John the other day, for instance, on the public safety building. Who's going to coordinate and oversee that? Who's the contractor going to be
The point
talking
man.
to on decisions every day that might be construction related? And do we have that expertise? We have Lauren and we have some, building inspectors, but that was one of the questions I had a discussion with John. So who's going to be the project manager from our standpoint, for instance, on the public safety building?
Yep,
Because-
there's the first project that we have, right? And then all the other ones are projects as well.
Because
so.
believe me, when we constructed the distribution center out here, there's a lot of things that come up on a daily basis that need to be answered. And so we've talked about, kind of who the project manager would be and how we would authorize change orders and to what limit we would do that. So I'm glad that my level of thinking has arisen to yours.
About that, but
Anything else?
this looks fun and exciting. I mean, these are exciting things that I see happening in the city that just make me happy to be living here. I mean, that's just
Easy to put on paper, but once we decide and prioritize those, then we need to have a plan and we need to execute and be accountable for that plan. Councilmember Barker.
Yep, I had thought of one thing. I think it's a good idea if we coordinate with neighboring cities, so we're not all doing the same thing. Because I know right now, Pleasant View's in the process of building 8 more pickleball courts, so they'll have 12. If they have 12, is it really that urgent that we build 4 over here? I don't know. Or they're also working on their corridor on 2700 because we share the same road. And why not work together with them? I already know a whole bunch of businesses that are coming that we've already approved plans for coming in Pleasant View. Why not work together to say keep coming north or east?
Good point. I know John stays in contact pretty much with Amy.
Yep.
So that they have that coordination, but yeah, we ought to work together as much as we can to.
Instead of each being individual cities and saying what this is our city and we're not going to share, why not pool our efforts? And
Which is good. We haven't found much sharing in other aspects we've tried to do, but maybe this will be the breakthrough. There are a lot of breakthrough things going on today, so to speak. Good point. So, council, what I would ask, and future council member Dalpaz, if you would look at this list and maybe rank these with the knowledge we have, I think we can kind of estimate the size of the project and potential, but at least if you would rate these and get them back to me, then we can kind of accumulate and see if we can ultimately agree upon priority, and maybe it's 2 or 3 segments. These are high priority, these are, but if you would rank each one of those, including you, Councilmember Stoker, you're not done with us yet, then we could move forward.
is John going to send us the list?
yeah, I was gonna ask you that because I didn't see it in the packet. So
Absolutely.
Thank you.
John will send you the list.
That's
It'll
the
actually be
Chick-fil-A.
laid out good with, so you can rate it properly. It'll be much more professional than the mayor's bullet points. So, okay.
We can do ranked choice voting on this.
Well, what's that thing? What do we do? It's what?
Choosing by advantages. Oh, yeah.
choosing by advantages.
Yeah, that-
Maybe we should identify what the advantages are of each one of these and rank them by advantage, but I'm a simple guy, so just give me your rankings of what you think we ought to concentrate on and get further information on to move forward. Because ultimately, yes, we have to know what we can afford. And I've always believed that needs come before wants, and so I would hope that we could rank the needs, but we're not just a city of strictly needs. I think there's some wants that we have to mix in there to have a committee that, a community that's congruent and works together, so. Okay, thank you for your input. Well, gentlemen, could you get that list out?
I
By
was gonna say, it
Friday?
depends on when this meeting ends.
Oh, so you'll do it right after the meeting?
I could do it
Is that what you're
tonight.
saying?
Yeah.
Well, John will get that to you. It sounds like very quickly. I'm not sure it'll be tonight, but if you could return that by our next council meeting, it would be greatly appreciated. And don't be offended if you get a phone call as a reminder. So, all right. To accomplish these things, I think we need to have a financial plan. And maybe some policies. And once again, somebody once said, rules are made to be broken. So these would be, flexible. They're not in concrete where they can never be changed, but I think gives us some guidance and some bumpers to operate within. One thing that I really believe, and I've had an in-depth conversation with Councilmember Swanson about the financial plan since he is signed as the council member there. I think we're both in agreement that even though councils will change, if there's a plan in place that's working, generally council won't throw that out. So this would hopefully set at least a baseline or groundwork for any council in the future. But one thing that we did agree on, and in addition to many others, is that we really need to take a longer term perspective than we historically have. We've kind of gone year to year and hope for the best, and we've done a pretty good job at doing that. But the world is changing. And so I think we need to take a longer term perspective that, as I've indicated here, promotes and facilitates positive change. The finances of the city are very strong. We've probably just made the biggest commitment on payment that we ever have. So that's changing a little bit as we put some of that pressure into the recipe of what we're doing. But I think that's one of the things we have to look at is making sure we're building the strength and increasing that. And I would like to see some specific policies and procedures that would be identified that can improve our financial management, our fiscal management. We have a great financial officer who's very anxious to kind of move things along and improve, and we're glad she's with us. I think these policies should be somewhat formal, but we've got to balance policies and structure with reality. So I think it's got to be structurally balanced. I think it's got to include the level of unrestricted fund balances, particularly in the general fund. We know that some of these things on the list we just talked about will involve capital projects funding. And of course, we have our enterprise funds, and we've made a commitment to the citizens that we will just make adjustments as necessary to cover increasing costs. So we've still got to maintain balances there for unknown future things. And once again, for those of you who love accounting and finance, fund balance doesn't always equal working capital. It's nice to have a fund balance, but I've yet to understand how we can expend the fund balance. People usually like cash. And so we've got to figure out how to generate adequate cash to meet our future needs. So I've kind of bullet pointed a couple things here in developing the budget. Here's some of the things that I think the department heads should consider as they go about budgeting. And feel free to step in and make comments at any time. This is an informal discussion. But I think we need to maintain a focus on outcomes. What do I mean by that? If we're going to expend money, we ought to be doing it for a reason. And what are those outcomes? For instance, Councilmember Severing has indicated his goal is to make North Ogden the safest city in the state of Utah, not the fifth, but the safest. So if that's the outcome, and we're going to spend money, we better be able to measure that, right? And tie that to an outcome. And that ought to be something that we all think about as we budget. JD, I think this may answer your question. We need to make sure as we budget, we establish a link to the agreed upon priorities because they have to be funded. So as we budget, we should be linking those to the agreed upon priorities that the council sets forth. Then we've made a commitment, and I think we've done a pretty good job at it, not perfect. But we've committed to be transparent with our citizens and how we spend the money and the projects that are going on. The old statement is nobody likes surprises, right? So we try not to surprise the council or the citizens. But we need a communication plan that's transparent and understandable as we go about budgeting. Sometimes we forget that 99.9% of our citizens are not CPAs, thank heavens. And so as we budget and we put together a communication plan, it has to be at a level that is understandable and clearly in our communication. This might be something new to government. I don't know. This is pretty standard in where I come from. But we need to include a component of the budget plan that incentivizes city employees to keep North Ogden a great place to live. And that's just not monetarily. I've seen that our department heads and our team members here have a lot of pride in what they do. So how do we incentivize them to keep doing what they're doing and actually improve upon that? You know, it could be monetarily based upon outcomes taking place as we've agreed. It may be other forms, but I do think that we have to incentivize, you know, our team members to accomplish the things that we agree upon. And then once again, as we budget, I think we really have to avoid short-term thinking. So some of the things that I think maybe we could consider in setting some specific policies, procedures, targets, whatever you want to, rules of the game, defining, you know, the playing field, whatever we want to call it. I've listed a couple things here that hopefully we can have further discussion on this evening. We've talked about maintaining a minimum 15% of qualifying revenues in unrestricted fund balance. And the question has come up with, well, when would we use that? Is it if somebody has indigestion that we would do that? Or, you know, John tells us a dad joke, would that qualify to utilize that money? Hopefully not, because his jokes aren't that good, frankly. But these are things that I think we could consider that they can only be used for the following things as approved by the city council. One is funding a shortfall in the public safety budget that is determined to be necessary to protect the safety of North Ogden citizens. So we would dip into the minimum 15% for that purpose. Now it's a little bit wide open how we would define that, but we would be willing to do that because that is our number one priority, I believe, is the safety of our community and our citizens. So if it came to that point that there was a major downturn in the economy, we wouldn't start cutting, you know, police force. We would be willing to dip into this if properly justified by Mr. Quinney. Jay Quinney.
So-
Councilmember Severing.
Yes, Mayor, is this a separate general fund or is this?
This is our general fund balance.
Okay.
Well, it's just the remaining, yeah, we
when
called
would
it,
we use
we
it?
called it the rainy day fund.
Okay.
By state law, that can be up to 35% of your qualifying revenues. It used to be 25%, I believe, Jamie, and this was recently. But to me, I don't know why we would maintain citizen money just to be sitting there unnecessarily if we feel like maintaining 15% is adequate.
Thank you.
Okay, does that answer your question? Thank you, good question. The second reason I think we would dip below 15% is an emergency declaration made by the mayor and supported by the city council that requires monetary funding to provide essential services that protects the health and well-being of North Ogden citizens. Now, we could further define that, but those are the two overreaching things on which we would be willing to use some of the rainy day funding. It wouldn't be necessarily just to maintain current budget status across the city. It would have to qualify in those regards. Now, you'll see a little bit later that hopefully we can build a little bit more cushion above the 15%, but we would never drop below that other than for those two potential reasons. We've also talked about maintaining a $1 million fund balance in the capital projects fund for opportunities that may arise that can't be funded by available impact fees. I think we don't want to miss opportunities, and if we go right to the bottom of the barrel, we could miss out on some opportunities. And I think we've identified enough things that are coming along that having $1 million there is not unreasonable. I would also like to see us create a capital improvements category as a subcategory of the capital projects fund, or maybe even a separate fund. We'd leave that up to our financial person that can be utilized to maintain physical facilities in the city. As we build this new building, a lot of times when budgets get tight, maintenance is deferred. And then all of a sudden you recognize you've got this huge amount of deferred maintenance sitting out there. And instead of it being maintenance, it becomes repair, so to speak. And you find yourself in a difficult situation. So I would hope that we could set aside some money for this building, for the public works building, for the public safety building, for the senior citizens, for the amphitheater, those type of things that we know are going to require long-term maintenance. We can talk a little bit about a proposal to fund that. And this would be the proposal. I would propose that the capital projects and capital improvements fund would be derived from excess sales tax dollars above the annual budgeted sales tax revenues. Now, what do I mean by that? Let me just give an example. I think this year we, just in round numbers, maybe $3.5 million of sales tax. We're well above collecting that, right? So theoretically, we could just say, hey, we've got an additional $500,000. Let's figure a way to spend it, right? It's easy to spend other people's money, I found out in my business career. And so that's what I'm talking about is we budgeted 3.5, let's say we collect 4. That would be the excess sales tax dollars above the annual budgeted sales tax revenues. And here's what I would propose that we set as a budget for sales tax going forward. Instead of looking at it and trying to make some projection, and that's what it is because we're all surprised what's happening with sales tax right now. But I would propose that how we budget sales tax for our process is that they would be limited to an increase of the CPI over what we budgeted last year. So let's just say that we budgeted $3.5 million this year. Let's say the CPI is 5%. We would budget $3.5 million plus 5%. that would be the sales tax budget. Now, obviously, the council has to be on top of things to see if the economy is turning dramatically. We have the right to adjust the budget during the year, and we would be irresponsible if we didn't do that. But additionally, and on top of the CPI, I would propose that the council each year, based upon estimated population, allow a growth factor in that. So let's say that our population grows 2%. We would make an adjustment factor on top of the CPI to come up with the amount of budgeted sales tax. Now, that's going to be important because as we go down this list, you're going to see how that money would be spent. And it's a whole different approach to budgeting than we've really ever used before. So what I would propose in this example I gave, 4 million this year versus a budget of 3.5 million, we would take that $500,000 and 80% of that would fund the capital projects fund. That money would go in there to do things like Barker Park or things we've talked about as part of our priority list. 20% would go into the for use in capital improvements. Now that percentage can be, that's just throwing out as an example. 20% might be too much. We might want to have more going into the capital projects so we can accomplish some of those things. Then here's kind of the cushion, because what we've historically done is we've randomly said, here's how much money we want to transfer in the capital projects, whether it was to maintain 25% or we need this much to put into the public safety building. What I'm proposing is that we would transfer no money out of the general fund into the capital projects fund until we hit 20% of unrestricted revenues. So we would go from 15%, which is our minimum, to 20%. So we have some cushion in there. Now, that doesn't mean any funds can't go into the capital projects fund, because I think you'll see we're going to kind of budget that way. So the other thing that I would like to have the council consider is, as I mentioned before, fund balance is nice, but cash is king, as they say in the accounting world. And so we need to accumulate money in these funds, particularly in enterprise funds. And so I would propose that for capital expenditures in excess of the amount that's available for impact fees, and they're not funded by grants, we would limit those to 85% of the prior year's depreciation in each respective fund. That way we're accumulating cash, right? Just not fund balance, because depreciation is a non-cash expenditure. So that 15% would be basically cash that we would accumulate, as long as we maintain excess revenues over expenditures, which I think we would always budget to do. Then as we talk about the enterprise funds, which would be, water, sewer, garbage, those type of things, I think we need to come up with what percent of revenues we want to have the fund balance accumulate to. Because the last thing I would want to do is accumulate excess funds on the backs of our citizens by increasing fees, right? But if we can clarify what percentage we're willing to have in there, I think it's always prudent to have a percentage of your revenues for when crises do come along. So we probably need to maybe agree on some percentages there. Now, here's where it comes to a major change, I think, in our budgeting process. So how do we allocate the unrestricted non-property tax revenues? How would we allocate those? Because we know that the entire amount of property tax by ordinance has already been assigned to public safety, right? We also know that there's inadequate property taxes to do that. I think we were at like 58% or something, John, this, before we add on the
Right. Yeah.
building. So we know that a good chunk of that sales tax, or what we call unrestricted non-property tax, which could be building fees, it could be court fines, it could be all kinds of various things other than sales tax. So how would we allocate that unrestricted sales tax revenues? First of all, I think the priority would be to fund the bond payments. In fact, we really pledged all of our sales tax, so that's by contractual obligation that has a first priority basically on our sales tax.
Yep.
So no brainer there that's got to be the first allocation. And we know based upon today's numbers with the contracted cost to build that and the potential rate, it's going to be about $400,000 a year that has to come right out of the sales tax number by obligation. The second thing I would say is to supplement public safety when there's an inadequate amount of property taxes to fund the approved public safety budget. That's the only way we can retain and grow our police force, is to use sales tax money or other non-property tax revenues to do that. I think that's in line with our priority of safety and growing the police department. The third thing that I think we would then subtract from the non-restricted non-property tax revenues would be an amount that the city council agrees upon in excess of revenues and expenditures. Now, this year we budgeted to have excess revenues of 500,000, right? So this would be to build the amount here to build our fund balance to 20%. And additionally, I think probably most of you hate debt just like I do. This may be a way that we can early prepay the bond if we so desire to do that. So the third thing is, what are we going to budget to? And we would take that out of the estimated revenues. And then the fourth thing, the remainder after we look at our revenues that aren't property tax and aren't restricted, like road funds, etc. The remainder of that would be allocated in a specific dollar amount to each respective general fund department. And that's what they would have available to budget to. So instead of just having them come in with a large request, what we would say is, you've got $800,000. That's your share of the budgeted funds. You budget your priorities based upon that, and the council then would just approve priorities to make sure that there's nothing that's not connected to our priorities and our goals. I had Jamie probably prepared it. John sent it to me. Some historical information on what percentage of revenues have gone to each department over the last 5 years. So it gives us somewhat of a baseline that we could look at and then make appropriate adjustments based upon certain things we know are happening in those departments. So that would kind of be a new way of approaching it, is here's the revenues we've got. Here's priority 1, 2, 3, and 4. Here's what's left over. Then we allocate that out to each department to properly budget. Now we've got to have some discernment. There's going to be things that are going to arise where we're going to have to make adjustments there, but at least it gives us a basis starting to know where we're at. And then we need to have some type of carryover provision. So if a department has a specifically identified one-time capital expenditures that's not completed in that respective fiscal year for something beyond their control, we want them to know that that can be carried over, because the old thing is, well, if I spend this much, if I don't spend it this year, they'll take it away from me next year, right? And I don't think we want to get into that mode. We want them to know if this is an approved part of the budget, that they don't have to spend that somewhere else, that it will be carried over and maybe identified as part of the capital projects fund or some other methodology. So does that give you enough to throw up on tonight, or what are your thoughts? And
I just thought
Council Member Ekstrom?
when we're trying to do this, of course, are we going to base it off the prior year to budget for the coming year? I mean, we've got a timing issue here, I see, of trying to figure out what the amounts are. You know, I mean, we were so surprised this year when we were trying to do the budgets and we, cut, and then it was like, wow, it was, so are we kind of keeping that in mind? It's just kind of looking at it historically. Is that how we're going to try and?
I think that's simply a starting point.
Just the starting point?
We budgeted sales tax, and then we would look at it and say, okay, we adjust that by CPI plus the growth factor. And I'm sure the council would consider those things in the growth factor. But at least gives us a starting point for sales tax budgeting situation. But we would probably at least start with what percentage each department has historically received. And then look at it and say, because I was looking at the schedule in some departments, you can see a blip, and that's for a legitimate reason, right? So it either needs to continue for that reason, or it needs to be reduced because that was a one-time occurrence, if that makes sense.
And then the thing that's just the big question mark now is because of inflation. I mean, right now we're seeing things that the inflation rate that we have not seen for a very long time. So we just gotta
CPI.
keep that in mind.
That's why we would tie it to, if the CPI is 6%, that's what we would budget an increase in our. But we have to balance that with our retention policy, right? We surely have made a commitment to make sure we're providing appropriate benefits and salaries. But that's why we kind of brought in that CPI fact, is that, costs are rising, we know. And pepperonis are getting pretty expensive.
I'm just thinking of even the cost of our building, the people that bought it
Want to
3.5
raise,
years ago, they're wanting to sell it for basically double what they
Yeah.
paid for it.
which will have some effect on your rent, I can assure you.
Looking at it too. We'd like to actually condo our building out and buy it.
There you go.
Oh,
Councilman Severie, are you in deep thought there? Do you have a comment?
Yeah, I didn't understand everything you said.
You didn't?
I'm not really up on my generally accepted accounting principles.
We can get
But-
you, we can get you in some classes.
Okay.
Okay.
But because I trust you and love you, Mayor, I'm supportive of everything you want to do.
Ooh, that's dangerous. Dangerous.
but it's a good approach. I like it.
Well, I understand some of it,
Yeah.
but there's some terms that are just,
It's really an approach, Councilman Severing, and I appreciate your comments on that regard because, we talked about keeping things simple, right, and understandable. So this is kind of an approach that I think the council can massage and if we agree with the approach. If we don't agree with the approach, we can surely. Let me go to Councilman Swanson. Are you still with us, Phil?
I am. Can you hear me?
We can. Do you have some comments since you're our financial liaison with the city?
I don't have anything to add other than what I've mentioned to you previously, Mayor, and that is that this is a great step in the direction of taking the personality out of the future plans of North Ogden. With this kind of a system in place, the residents can be assured that the way things are budgeted, the way things are done in North Ogden primarily won't change as new administrations, new council members and such are elected and come and go. And I think that is a powerful thing for the city.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Anyone else?
I did like your long-term thinking and not short-term. I think that's very important. And I do like your approach, but you'd have to make it a lot simpler for me to understand.
It took me a second to remember what CPI stood for. I'm like, agreeable. Oh,
Good point.
right.
Consumer price index, right?
That's what I just told Blake here. I was like, oh, that's right.
You know, or inflation.
Inflation index.
It was part of the budget right there. Future council member Dalpas. Oh,
I was just gonna say, Mayor, can we get a copy of that as well?
yes, that will come out, and this is just to generate discussion and ideas. Though I'm sure there'll be lots of questions, I hope, for further understanding, because we do want this to be not only understandable by our citizens, but by our department heads who will be budgeting for these things going forward.
I was just going to say that I think some departments will be greater impacted by inflation than others, so I don't know how that's going to factor in, you know. The Parks and Recreation and Public Works with their lawnmowers, maybe lawnmowers go up 15% in price, and the chlorine for the aquatic center only goes up 4% next year, so.
Yeah, it might be 50% on the chlorine.
Yeah, well, you know, I'm just saying that there's going to be a difference, so maybe we can take a look at that and watch that, but I love your plan, it's great.
And that's a good point. Not that you love the plan, but the point being that this is another discussion Councilmember Swanson and John have had, is that adjustment. We talked about each department wouldn't have the same necessarily allocation of the remaining balance. The overall fund would be tied to CPI, but how that's allocated, it's kind of back to, we saw some of those blips over the 5-year average, and we would need to look at that and say, okay, is that something that's continuing, and what further investment would be needed on that? So I think we're in line with that thinking, JD. I didn't, everybody's still awake. That wasn't my goal. Councilmember Sedley.
Mayor, I just found an accounting for dummies on Amazon,
How much is it?
$9.99.
Save your money.
Is that $9.99 or $999?
22 bucks.
See, that's the problem. First of all, you got to understand the money aspect of things. Councilmember Sedley. Maybe we could all chip in and get that for you as your Christmas present.
Mayor,
Councilmember?
the more I'm thinking about this, the more I really like this approach. It systematizes it, which is, I really like systems, right? It's like we're taking the priorities of what we say we want to do and what's really important, and not just, and then, you know, there are two schools of thought. Like my parents were really funny, because it's like my mom was really, really regimented about accounting and keeping track of everything, where my dad, you know, even in his family business, it's like they didn't even really understand, you know, revenues minus expenses is actually your income, you know. So that, you know, there's this tendency to like, oh, we have money, you know, and then want to go spend it. But this actually puts it in like, okay, how much have we got? What have we got? Where is it going to go? And where is it going to go first? And if we can kind of, you know, legislate, you know, put it into, like, canonize it, I guess, as you would, then it takes the personality, I think, as Phil said, out of what's done. It's like, these are what we've said are the priorities. You know, public safety first, and that, you know, and infrastructure. I mean, we've got to have the health and safety. So we've got, water, sewer, it's going back to that. We take bad out and bring good in, and then we have to be careful about, take bad out. What does that look like? And then what does, what different things, because the bringing good in is really kind of subjective, right? We have some people that's like, that's not good for me, it's good for me, so that we can kind of pick and choose. We can't do everything, but we can do some. No, I like it. It's good.
And just as a reminder, one of the key things is linking the budget to agreed upon priorities.
Mhm.
And I don't know if John got any information, but we encourage the department heads to kind of feed up to us some of their priorities. And I don't know if we heard back from anyone yet, but we surely want to make sure we consider that. And I think this is, I try to put myself on the other side of the equation here. And if I'm a department head, I'm really sometimes confused and anxious and, how I go about this. And, change is something, someone once said change is good as long as it doesn't affect me. So I'm sure that, there's going to be a lot of questions from the department heads and suggestions. Tonight is to generate discussion, at least to get a starting point. But does the theory, does the approach sound reasonable that we can build upon it?
I like it.
All right, then we will proceed along that. What else, what other thoughts might you have? All right, JD.
So when do we start seeing the fruits of this system? So is it, we put it into place sooner than later, and then it's next fiscal year that we start to see it? Or when do we start to really see the beginning fruits of this plan? You know what I mean?
And the tough thing will be, first year, we'll link it to the priorities, right? Because we've got so much to do, as you mentioned, on the priorities. Where's the funding going to come from? How much is this going to cost? But I do believe we could implement this year the process of allocating budgets and taking the unrestricted non-property tax revenues and allocating them, how we talked about, starting with that process. But I think this is going to be kind of a multi-year situation, but it's like the old saying, when's the best time to plant a tree? Yesterday, but we'll start today and start moving forward. And I think we can identify some of the things that we can implement probably in this upcoming fiscal year, because budgeting is just around the corner. And then, as we talked about, just like with our priorities, we need to identify in this plan kind of a Gantt chart, I guess, for lack of a better term, on how we're going to implement this, what we can do, now and what we can do next year, and have a plan that we can execute. But I would like us to at least start implementing some of these approaches this year in our budgeting.
So Jeannie, are you up for getting us all the figures? This is kind of gonna fall on you, right? A lot of this is gonna be like, okay, what have I got? And then you're gonna help, be figuring out these percentages for us. Is that?
Yeah, I'm sitting here with a big smile on my face.
Okay. Awesome.
Well, I
She's
think
our
it
number
takes,
cruncher.
well, it takes some of the frustration out of, I just think the process we follow has created a lot of frustration, not only for the department heads, but for the finance folks and even the city attorney and manager. Because, he has to make sure the budget's executed, right? So hopefully this will, I know there'll be some initial anxiety just with change itself, but the goal long-term is to relieve a lot of the stress and the anxiety from our team instead of creating more. Okay, we will then, if there's no strong objections, we'll proceed in developing a more defined plan and look forward to your prioritization. And hopefully we can get something out inviting the citizens to give us some additional input on things that we may not have considered, things they may want added or subtracted, and we'll go from there. John.
Chief Quinney would like to make a comment if this was the appropriate time for it, Mayor.
That would be appropriate. Any of the department heads are here, we'd like them to participate.
Well, Mayor and Council, great conversation. Just touch on something that's already on the list, maintaining the staffing levels. One of our priorities right now is proactive policing, and our newer officers and our veteran officers are doing a great job at it. We've taken more guns and drugs off the streets this year than I think we have ever, which is awesome. So that plays in part of retaining these guys. I think it could only do us good. The second thing is not on the list is code enforcement. And I would like the council to maybe consider what their priority is as far as code enforcement goes. Right now that falls upon the police department, and we dedicate about 29 hours a week to that. And we would like to know if you would like us to dedicate more. If so, we might need some staffing adjustments. So just another thing to add to the list, if you could, please.
You bet. That's we could probably incorporate that in the retention of the police and growing the police force accordingly. So we'll make sure that that's considered there in maintaining and growing the police force in accordance with the population. We're probably already a little behind on code enforcement with our current population. So good points, Chief.
And just one other thing, in all my studies of staffing levels and crime deterrence, the number one crime deterrence is the fear of being caught. And that comes from officers on the road,
Yep.
As well as some other things. So thanks for your consideration.
Yeah, you recall, I think in staff meeting last week, I talked about how important the visibility of police are, because as I look out my back door and when I see an officer parked there by the equestrian park, everyone goes slow. And when they're not there, everybody goes fast. So it is a deterrent. I think we've talked about the best proactive policing we can have is the visibility of our officers. In fact, you probably saw, I think it was Provo just got a new police chief.
Yes.
And he was talking about that. He was talking about the importance of community policing, which I think we've dealt with in this last year, how important community policing is versus general policing. There is a huge difference. And not only are our officers taking and preventing crime, but they also have great relationships with the citizens, which is important. So all of our first responders will give you some kudos to Councilmember Barker.
Mhm.
All right. Well, John has a lot of work to do tonight before he goes home, because he said, depending on when the meeting got over. So any other comments or questions before we move down our agenda? Which would be public comments. So John, if you would watch those who are with us electronically, and then those of you who are here, if you would state your name, if you're North Ogden residents, and try to keep within 3 minutes, we'd be very appreciative.
Hi, Stephanie Casey. I'm a North Ogden resident. I appreciate the discussion tonight about the future planning of the city. I do have to make a comment though about the zoning before, and Councilman Swanson. This is tough. I feel that I need to stand as the co-chair of the General Plan Advisory Committee. This is a community volunteer committee residents who have worked really hard in a subject that we don't understand. We've taken the time to learn, to look into other cities, to how they're preserving land, to what they're doing, and how we can incorporate that to really make our city great. We've worked under the direction and guidance of John Call and the planning director, whether that was Rob Scott or Scott Hess. We have not just gone off doing whatever we want, picking out pieces of land and saying, oh, we're not going to develop on this. I'd like to also point out that the section that is marked out as conservation area on the map that was pulled up that we worked on is actually taken directly from the 2015 future zoning map. It is already marked out as conservation area. We simply worked hard to define what that would mean for our community and what we felt would work. And I look forward to that being presented to everyone. It was presented to the Planning Commission officially with a lot of great discussion. When we have residents that are willing to step up and get involved, that means something. And I know that Councilman Swanson was on that committee when I first started, and according to our minutes, he was excused from every meeting up until February of this year. So being that passionate about this, I would have loved to have him been involved and heard his thoughts and input in a productive way, rather than me feeling like I've sat through 2 council meetings and been blasted. And that maybe was a little heated, but I've been trying to sit there calmly. I've watched a lot of people take personal time to learn and understand and work hard because they care about this city.
Thank you. Any other comments this evening? John, anybody electronically?
Oh, yep.
Nope, yep.
Susan Kilborn just raised her hand.
All right, Ms. Kilborn. Can you hear us?
Yeah, you ready to hear me?
Yeah, we're actually ready.
Okay, I have comments and I have questions, but I promise you I won't take forever. First of all, do you want me to shotgun my questions and my comments, or do you want me to make comments and then state a question and you answer it, and then I state my second question and you answer it? What do you want, Mayor?
Whatever you can do in 3 minutes, and you know we're always willing to meet personally with you to answer any questions.
Oh my God, here we go. Okay, first of all,
however you want to approach it.
Yeah,
You can just call me.
mess with me. Don't mess with me. Okay, first of all, I want to thank Cheryl Stoker for her service over these last years as city council member. The holidays are coming up. I'm sure there's another meeting. I know there's one on the 12th. Not everybody's going to be involved, but thank you, Cheryl, for being a good civil servant. Also, I want to thank everybody on the council tonight for their very thoughtful comments. I think we're headed in the right direction. And as a not so humble 33-year resident taxpayer of North Ogden City, I care what happens in this city. And there's a lot of us out here that do. I would like to see more incentive, and gosh, I wish I knew how to do it, to drum up more people being involved in input. I don't know what you look at as far as participation from private citizens, but I'd like to see more involvement. I'd like to see more input. I don't want to see just a handful of people make decisions that affect all of our lives. So that's just a comment. Now, I want to dovetail on something that Blake said, and I am all for what he said in making public safety a major priority. And I have a question for John in that currently, do we require our law enforcement officers to live within the bounds of North Ogden?
No, most of them actually can't afford at current house prices, but they are required to live within a specific distance. So if we need them, they have to respond in a certain amount of time.
Okay, so like there's what, normally like a 35-mile radius is what it normally is in a lot of cities.
It's similar to what other cities do.
Okay. We have a major problem with not only recruitment, but retention. It seems like we're like a training ground, and I'm sure Chief Quinney would agree with me that when you get officers here that bond with the community, bond with the citizens, you have better officers, you have better citizens. So we have got to find a way to recruit and retain officers. Maybe we can give them we've got to find some perks for them, or I know it's probably not legal to, if they, that's not going to work. That's not legal. I know it's not. I don't know. And I don't know who looks at these different things that Mr. Mayor and the council have laid out for us as priorities, but that's a big priority for me because I've been here for so long and I don't want to see our public service and law enforcement deteriorate because we're not doing enough to support them. Okay, so that's one thing. Second thing is President Biden and his infrastructure bill passed and Utah is getting a piece of the pie. Is it too premature to ask if we're going to get a big bite or a little bite of that piece of the pie that the state is getting for some of the things that we want to accomplish here in our city? It may be premature, but something to think about.
And we don't have any information, I think, on how that's going to be allocated.
Yeah, it's probably premature.
I believe for the last go around, the state of Utah received $250 million, I think. I think the state kept 200 million and allocated 50 million out to the cities, which they had many requests, I think, submitted. I think based upon the number of requests, if they allocated it evenly, every city would get $100.
Oh,
But
really?
we're hoping that the state will, if we understand correctly, the amount that they'll loosen up with some of that. But I think the devil's in the details, which we haven't really seen yet. We know that's intended purpose, but we haven't seen the allocation. So, but you can be aware that we'll go after our fair share.
Oh yeah, totally. I actually thought it was 3.2 billion, but I don't know where I got that number from. Obviously, I acquiesce to what you know.
I think you're right. I think it's a lot of money either way.
Yeah, well, we need to wheedle ourselves in there because a lot of this stuff, could be subsidized with, that kind of funding. We're paying.
We really like you, Susan, but your 3 minutes is approaching.
Okay, bye.
You didn't have to say goodbye. I was just telling you, giving you an early warning. What else do you have?
I was just going to volunteer my services to help you, but that's off the table now. You just missed out. You missed the boat, Mr. Mayor.
I'll send you some cookies.
Yeah, right.
Or maybe the cookies I'm supposed to be receiving, I'll return, something like that.
All right. Just prioritize your items, your bullet points, because I want to, and really let's deal with the parks we have and not build anymore, please. Thank you. Goodbye.
Okay.
Happy
Goodbye.
New Year. Merry Christmas.
Same to you, and thanks for joining us tonight. John, do we have any other comments?
Nope.
All right. Anyone else this evening that would like to add to the joy of the meeting? Okay, we'll go on to item number 8. Now, we'll seek comments from the council and staff. And then the mayor will have a few comments. Councilmember Stoker, do you have any comments this evening?
No.
Councilmember Barker? Councilmember Swanson, do you have any comments this evening?
Yeah, just a couple of things. First of all, an apology to Steph and the committee. I didn't mean to come across the way that I did. As far as not attending the meetings, Mayor, if you remember right after you were elected and the committee had its first couple of meetings because of the known personality clashes that would exist. I knew that my presence in the committee would probably create more fire than it would progress. And if you'll remember, I resigned from that committee, Mayor. I don't know why I continued to receive the emails and be considered a member of the committee, but I haven't officially been a member of that committee for well over 15 months. So that's why I haven't been at the meetings. I wanted the committee to be free to discuss as they wanted to without my commentary, knowing that I would have full commentary as a council member. I do appreciate the work they've done. I just think it's taken way longer than it ever should have. But we can talk about that till we're dead in the face. Anyway, that's all I have. I just appreciate serving with everyone, and that's it.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Swanson. Be safe on your way home. Councilmember Severing.
I just happened to catch this on KSL the other day. It talked about how the Utah courts should improve their collection of fines. I was just wondering how we do as a city with collecting of fines. Do we have we obviously have some kind of a budget or something.
Yeah, good point. I think just a reminder, is it 85% of all fines collected go to the state?
Pretty much at 85%.
About 85%, I think, goes to the state. I believe the attitude of our officers is to try to educate first, one way, but if that doesn't get through, then sometimes the best way to educate is consequences. But I don't think that's the first priority. We try to educate our citizens, but we're not afraid for those who come into our city with drugs and guns and those other things to take action immediately. So, but I don't know on the collection, John.
And there's two different types of collections. One is the fine for the crime, and the other is the reimbursement, restitution for the victims. And so I haven't read that article, but it might be dancing both of those lines on making sure that, you know, people who are involved in or are victims of crimes are getting their money back or being paid in that. So if you'll send that to me, I'll read it and what I'm thinking. Or perfect.
Or hand it to you.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
It's got pictures, John. All right. Anything else, Councilmember Severing?
No, thank you.
Councilmember Ekstrom? Do you have anything to add this evening?
I got an email that was about putting in essentially sidewalk that would be kind of by itself in an island. So it was like we're annexing a property on 1700 as the Randalls. Anyway, and they're required to put in now curb and gutter, which is going to be essentially, well, I think the curb and gutter goes in, but the sidewalk, which they're gonna have to remove some trees, but it's gonna be a section of sidewalk that is just by itself. Do we have we?
Would that be like
thought
a bridge to nowhere, like a
yeah,
sidewalk?
kind of like a
to nowhere?
bridge to nowhere. It's like, okay, nothing, the sidewalk, nothing. You know, so I'm just wondering about putting something in place that we have at least a certain length before we require putting in a sidewalk that's just going to get deteriorated before it's even connected to anything else. I don't, you know, it just was a thought, because I thought that does seem kind of crazy to just have, you know, especially where it's, you know, you're walking along and, you know, you're on gravel and then you want to go up to the sidewalk. You know, it's, to me, that's more of a tripping hazard than it is a help. But anyway, that was just something I was thinking about and something that had been asked of me. So I don't know if we want to, put that into something.
I'll mention it to Dave tomorrow. I know his team has been focusing on when we do have those islands that are created when a subdivision occurs, making the connection. Like this one, for example, there is actually sidewalk starting to the west, but it's one lot away. And so how do we make that connection at the right time? Like, which would be now, unless it's kind of budgeting and planning for it. But Dave, I'm sure will come back with a better plan than I could articulate right now.
Fantastic. Just, I'd really like it somebody else having it floating around their heads too.
Anything else?
Nope, that was it.
Thank you. Councilmember Stoker?
As a side note to this, a while ago, we did, didn't we put an ordinance kind of in place that sidewalks needed to be done, and yes, some sidewalks go to nowhere, but we knew eventually sidewalks would have to go in. So I don't know, like Dave will come up with a plan or an idea, but if we're gonna change some of that, then I think we've got to relook at that ordinance that was passed a while ago.
So, yeah, what had happened is we've gone several years of council waiving the sidewalk requirements for subdivisions. And then the council had a big discussion and said, we're not gonna do it anymore. And that was kind of what I think you're talking about, Councilwoman Stoker, and that's what we tell all the developers, hey, the council doesn't waive this. It's one of those things we do because waiving it just kicks the can down the road and the council's gonna have to find a way to pay for it someday. So.
Prime example of that would be the sidewalk there, just north of 2525 in front of Penny's house, because that was developed, it ends right there, and the road's widened, right, for future use. Because at some point in time, it will have to take place, and then who pays at that point in time, so. But we'll look at it. So thank you for bringing that up. Okay, John, do you have any comments for us this evening?
Sure, of course.
You work at Chick-fil-A or what?
Absolutely. So I think that the department heads will be really excited by the conversation tonight, because I think that this direction with budgeting that the mayor's putting together, with all these, with all the feedback and stuff, shows a lot of confidence in them and their ability to understand their needs. And so I think that's going to be it's going to increase and help and make our relationship stronger across the city. A couple of things to remind you of: code rewrite for the zoning code. It's on the 14th. Scott is hoping for any comments that you have to be included by, I believe it was Friday of next week, so that he can get it's Wednesday of next week.
Is he gonna send us out? I mean,
If you would like a hard copy, we
read it.
can print you one. It was included in the packet, but if you like a hard copy, we'll get you one.
Yeah, that's easy
Okay.
for me to read, yeah.
What is it, 200?
It is 300 pages, down from 350. No, it's 50 pages shorter than the old version, but
Well,
it's
very
still,
good.
it's either
still
250 currently or 300 pages.
Well, my goal is to be able to read it quickly and see how much I can absorb. That's really what I want to do.
And that'll be very helpful feedback.
Okay.
And obviously, remember, he mentioned that we know that there'll be changes that'll come back in the next year, because there'll be things that were missed, issues that we find. That's very common with these. City Hall is switching phone, or city, everyone is switching phone carriers, meaning the physical phones on desks. To make it's a more dynamic system, a better system, and a cheaper system, ironically, than what we've been using. But just so you know, that's happening. It's going to make the offices easier to connect and talk to. Bryce Nelson has been doing that and taking that on, and been very successful so far.
John, may I point out that one of the main motivations to do that is to better serve the citizens. Right now, it's somewhat segmented.
Yeah,
And this will make it easier to serve the citizens.
Yeah, currently we're using 3 different phone systems. So transferring between them is really hard. The new system with with our cell phones, we can actually answer our desk phone on our cell phones or on our computers, or, so it's gonna be a much more dynamic system. You've probably have seen comments or heard comments about the lefts on Pleasant View Drive. I know the mayor talked about it last week. That is an issue, but Dave and his team have been doing a lot of things to improve the visibility, and the chief and his team have been getting a lot of the word out about why that was gone, why that's gone, and what to expect.
And we have a sign up now, right, John?
Yes.
No left-hand turn, so it's kind of restriped.
And they'll be
So-
restriping next week.
And so there should be no question. Although I think you mentioned you saw a lot of car parts on the island there. Somebody forgot it was there or something.
I did receive an email. I did receive an email from someone that they had hit the barrier and torn quite a few pieces off of their car. So I told them the options they had, for pretty much, like the chief mentioned, the double yellow. It's illegal to go into that area, and they just missed that. And so that's why we're trying to enhance the visibility. What we had met engineering standards, but we're trying to make it easier so that we don't have more things like that, because the city isn't responsible for that type of damage. So the lighting on the Christmas tree, or the holiday lighting ceremony, is Saturday at 5 over at Barker Park. Santa will be showing up, as well as the Santa mailbox. I think will be happening again this year.
And,
I know it will be happening.
John, does the council need to help Santa with answering his letters? So-
If you would like to help, it will help a ton. We get a lot of them from kids, and the way it's built, there's a kind of several forms that you kind of mix and match together and insert names to make it creative, and each letter unique, but not from scratch.
I thought we were just helping Santa Claus respond to the kids.
Yes,
Okay,
the real one, or
there is only one.
it's true. Well, he has helpers,
Yeah,
right?
that would be, that's what I'm saying. We would be helping Santa respond to the children.
And then just a reminder, the police are doing their Sub for Santa. They do it every year. It's a great service to not only our community, but other families who are connected to our community, or just, we know they need help. So if you have a willingness to do that, if you'll reach out to Katie, she can help get you in touch with ways to help. Or even Lori over in the police department. So, and that's what I've got, Mayor.
All right, just a little color onto John's comment about the police forces and helping people understand the educational process. Someone said we had officers out there over the weekend. They could have easily stopped 200 cars, but they were busy dealing with the 40 that they tried to educate. So it has been an issue. And hopefully the sign and the painting will help. One of the things that I'm concerned about with these road designs, some of you may have seen this, but the effect this road design is going to have on businesses like 7-Eleven, particularly the access there. If UDOT cuts off the access off 2700 North going east with a cement island, and now you can't turn left in there. We've got to be very careful on what we're doing to our businesses when we do these type of things, because people like the ease of getting in and out, and when we make it difficult for them to get to our businesses. Any update, John? We talked about putting a sign up, a courtesy sign that says through traffic, please stay left, so that right. Have we progressed on that at all?
So they've been ordered, but they haven't shown up yet.
So there'll be kind of courtesy signs so people can use that right lane if possible. I did receive an email from Kevin at the sewer district. Apparently we've had a citizen on Mountain Road that's been paying for sewer that's not within 300 feet or something.
They're paying the assessed tax by the sewer district,
And they're
not
not in-
the monthly fee that the city charges.
So if they're in the district, whether they're in the county or not, they're paying the tax, right?
Correct. But some of them are in the city, so there's several homes in that area that are in that same situation. And as Kevin and I were talking it through.
So, but that has been annexed in, I guess, they have to de-annex if they don't want to pay
Correct.
the fee. So, all right, that's all that I have. Thanks, council, for your diligence in serving the community, and thanks to the citizens who join us. I think Susan had a good point. I'd like to see more citizen involvement and input, so spread the word to your neighbors that we don't bite if they come to council meeting, and maybe, I don't know, John Donuts or something. Might attract some people. But appreciate it. So with that, we'd be looking for a motion to adjourn. But before we do that, I just want to I don't want to add on to Susan. It's not done yet. I think John tells me that the term ends the first Monday, according to state law. So you'll be with us until that point in time, but we will have, I know Cheryl won't like this, but we will have an open house for people to come and express their appreciation for her 10 years of service. So whether you like it or not, we're planning on having it. Okay. Now we'll look for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.